Hello, welcome to Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production, all the way to release and reception. It is the season 4 finale. We have a very special movie and a special guest. Bridget, say hello. You've been on the show before. You did Swingers, right?
Yeah, and I think maybe one other as well.
You did it. Yeah, what was the other movie you did?
Yeah, the much more forgettable one, Desperate Hours.
Yes, The House, and then there's some intruders.
Oh, Kristen Stewart?
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait.
What?
No.
No. Panic Rooms for a future season.
Yeah. Ooh, count me in on that one.
Oh, that was the Michael Cimino movie.
Yeah. Desperate Hours with Mickey Rourke.
Why was I thinking of Kristen Stewart?
One.
Did you guys watch a movie with Kristen Stewart in it, like a horror movie?
Oh, The
With
Messengers.
Scarecrows?
We did that for their
Our podcast.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we did it on their podcast.
segue time. Bridget, plug your podcast for us.
Yeah, so we're actually just about to launch season 2 of our podcast, which is called Screen Time. It's a family quarantine podcast, and our sticking point. That's not a phrase.
I like it, though. It's our sticking point. We're sticking to it.
We think you should listen to it over other podcasts. Is that so the first little 20-minute segment, our kids age 5 and 7 talk about a movie or a show or something they've seen recently that they really like, and then the second half, my husband Mark and I talk about movie, show, something that we've seen that we like. So we're just kind of tracking media we consume during the, I guess we're not really technically in a quarantine anymore, but we're still
Delta Boogaloo, right?
Yeah, spiritual quarantine, I guess.
Huzzah. So yeah.
Welcome
If you
back.
want to hear like one podcast where they talk about the Descendants, the Disney series, and then
Ooh.
also Mayor of Easttown, for example,
Nice.
this is the podcast for you. Yeah.
What a mix.
You
What
should
a
have done.
juxtaposition.
You should have done The Descendants, the George Clooney movie.
Yeah, so good.
Well, so we connected the two because it's both movies or series deal with inherited trauma.
Oh,
And
that's brilliant.
inherited like who are you going to be,
Yeah.
right? The choices you make to kind of break different cycles. So
For sure.
Yep.
When's that coming out? Do you guys have a estimated
Friday, which
Right.
is August 20th.
Which is probably
Friday.
around when this show's coming out. So
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
go check out the new season of Screen Time.
Double creature. Thank you for having me.
of course.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And your husband Mark, who's been on the show with us before, but
Correct.
cannot tonight. He's also on that show with you, along with your adorable children, Malcolm and Coco.
Yes. And he can't be here tonight because 30 minutes into Toy Soldiers, he stood up and in a very uncharacteristic rage, he just like slammed down his computer and he said, "I can't watch this garbage a minute longer." And I haven't seen him.
Oh,
I haven't seen him. No, I'm kidding. None of that happened.
Oh, dang
man.
Yeah.
You sold me.
He's putting our kids to doing work. Sorry.
Understandable.
Wait, what are we watching? What's the movie?
Yeah, so the movie is Toy Soldiers. It is the 30th anniversary of this film this year of our Lord 2021. Came out in 91, and it's directed by Daniel Petrie Jr., who nobody knows. But he is an Academy Award nominated screenwriter who got a chance, as they are wont to do after they get an Academy Award, to direct a feature film. The movie he was nominated for, Beverly Hills Cop.
Which I think is a great script. Would we agree with that?
Oh yeah, solid script.
Yeah.
And so he co-wrote this script with David Coop, who is a native of the region of Wisconsin that all of us are from.
Really?
Yeah, he.
I don't like to say from, but sure.
Oh, okay, Bridget.
Lived for a minute.
You lived for over a decade, right?
Oh no, not a decade.
Really?
How long?
Almost a decade.
7 years.
7 years, yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, he graduated from Kettle Moraine, which is where one of our friends.
No, I'm
Aaron
sorry, 6
graduated.
years. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Trying to distance yourself from Wisconsin as much as you can.
I
Anyways, this is one of Coop's earlier scripts. He went on to basically be one of Spielberg's main guys. He did Crystal Skull and War of the Worlds much later. But it's based on a novel by William Pete Kennedy, that is basically a riff on Die Hard. I would argue it's probably the first riff on Die Hard post Die Hard.
When did Die Hard come out?
88. So
okay, so it's like right after.
Right. And so, it seemed like a pretty sure shot. There were a number of teen heartthrobs because the film is Die Hard in a prep school, and terrorists come take over because they're trying to look for the son of some guy that hurt one of their dads. It doesn't matter. The terrorists come to school.
I'm so confused by that.
No. It's quite easy. Wait. His father's in jail in America.
Okay.
The antagonist, right?
Yeah, the antagonist, the terrorist. The federal judge who's presiding over his case, his son goes to this school. And so the terrorist son was going to take him to school and, do the whole... That wouldn't even work, let's be honest, but neither here nor there.
Right, yes.
Yeah, I mean, the setup's fantastic. It's a great sort of classic setup. I mean, have you guys... The biggest question I have about this movie is because Chris came, he's like, oh, I want to do this movie, you're not going to like it or something. He said Toy Soldiers. I was like, I literally just rewatched this.
Right.
With my good friend Pippa, and we were watching it. It just like came into our heads, we have to rewatch this movie now. Because I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but this film has a really weird place in my memory and like nostalgia. Like I grew up with watching this movie over and over again. Like my sister, she obviously watched it because of the young men in it. She taped it off like HBO back in the day. So we had like that really like, sort of staticky copy of it that I would watch over and over again. Did you guys have the same? Did you guys watch this when it came out?
I've never seen this before. This is
what?
And I didn't like it.
Did you even know it existed in the 90s?
Yes, I knew it existed. I knew, like, I'm very familiar with the title, and I lump it in with like If Dead Poets Society, but machine guns.
But FARC terrorists.
Yeah, and like I had Dead Poets Society for the teen boys that I wanted to ogle. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and I'd rather ogle them learning about Yeats than doing this. So
that's actually really great that you brought up that comparison. I just got done listening to a way too long podcast with Will Wheaton, one of the young male celebrities who plays one of the main characters in the film. He plays Joey Trotta, and he went on this show where basically him and the host, Jonah Ray, who now most people know for being the new host of Mystery Science Theater, the name of the show is Let Me Watch Your Movie With You. And so they just talk while they watch the movie throughout the whole thing.
Will Wheaton from Star Trek. I'm sorry.
Right. Yes. So he does a lot of Star Trek talk, which is, yeah. But it's an interesting listen because he basically said that him and Sean Astin, who's arguably the lead, as well as the other kind of central group of actors, it kind of felt like there was Die Hard in 88 and then Poet Society in 89, I think, maybe 90?
Yeah, 89.
89. And then, so like as soon as they all got together and started getting a feel for like what they were doing, they're like, oh, they're just trying to mash these two things together. They're just trying to capitalize off of Dead Poet Society and Die Hard at the same time.
Now we're just talking about Wesley Crusher, though. I'm Google image searching.
Yeah. So I mean that was. I mean, it's interesting the mix of main casts that they have on here. So I'll answer your question, Dan. I was texting with our mutual friend Drax, who's been a guest on a show before, her Hollywood Insider correspondent. Because I was like, I have a very fond memory of watching this movie. I didn't watch it over and over again. I watched it a couple times, but I was like, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was like, did we watch or rent Toy Soldiers back in 5th grade or something? And he's like, maybe. Fuzzy memory, but then also as I was rewatching it later after I had texted him, I just suddenly had a visceral flashback to watching it with my brother. Wow. And it's one of those movies where it's you think it's gonna, I don't know, at least when he first told me about it, I was like, oh, this is it was probably around 5th grade. I was probably too young to be watching this movie because it's very violent for a movie starring teenage boys. but that was all, that happened every once in a while, like the Lost Boys.
Oh, it's just such a weird tone.
Right.
Like, yeah.
But I had this visceral flashback of being like, wow, that is a body getting machine gunned to shreds. And I am 12, like not even 11, whatever. So that's
sort of, there's also like the phone sex stuff in the beginning. I remember that was very scandalous when I was younger.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that? What is alcohol? What is this? What is this? Phone sex operator? What's that?
Yeah, that was fun. That one of the only female characters with any lines was the phone sex operator, and we don't even see her.
No.
So anyway.
Fun fact, the actress that plays that phone sex operator is the wife of the Rocky director. And they both basically just like forget all the people behind the scenes are men, of course, too. But essentially, according to, I think this was Keith Coogan, the guy who plays Snuffy, he's also the kid in Adventures in Babysitting and Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. He was on a different podcast called After Movie Diner, in which he talked about how they basically got to that scene and they realized that they forgot to cast the phone sex operator.
No. Yeah.
And so they just basically called in a favor because somebody knew somebody, and they just had her like record her lines in a van on the set real quick.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's honestly, I'm interested. Feel free to interject throughout, Bridget. Let's start though. How did you interact with watching a movie about teenage boys taking on terrorists as an adult woman?
I mean, I have to be honest with you. Like, I think I said to Mark like 7 different times, like, why did they pick this one? I was trying to figure out, like, is this there's usually a reason, and I found it to be like a weird mix of like almost kind of cringeworthy and then also boring. I don't mean to just be so, I won't be so harsh like the whole time, but it didn't hold my attention very well. And like action adventure, is that what we would call this? Action?
Yeah. That's
like not my favorite genre. That's one of my lowest level genres for personal enjoyment. But like coming
Con Air is one of your favorite films, correct?
Correct. Con Air, because that is a perfectly executed.
That feels different though. Huh? I mean,
Con
like
Air
this
is
feels
so different than this. Like, so okay, so I should say, like, I enjoy films that are part like from every represented genre, I would say, more or less. Mm-hmm. But then I also have genres where, like, even if it's a bad film, I like it. That's what horror is for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and like
totally.
Action adventure is like I don't like this genre. So if it's just doing the action adventure genre stuff, I'm not going to enjoy it at all because of that. But like you pointed out, Chris, there are movies within that genre that are just.
But I feel like it's a different genre though.
Con Air,
because like you think like Con Air, The Rock. I'll throw Chain Reaction in there for fun. Like those were of a Congo. Those were of a very specific kind of action film. Let's say like 1994 and on.
Sure. Well,
and this one feels, I don't know, older. I mean, it is older, but it has like a really old style to it.
Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just saying it's a 91 movie, but they filmed it in 1990, and they were still riffing off of the 80s. So it's like it feels like the last gasp of an 80s movie getting released in 91.
Yeah, but also like you bring up Die Hard, and I really enjoy Die Hard. It's not among my favorite movies, but that's a great movie. And I think the thing about this is that it was like there was too much. So the stuff I don't love about action adventure is when it's like prolonged fight scenes. This is why I've not gotten into a lot of superhero movies. Is I feel like that it just, and it's not even like I feel like I'm too highbrow for that, because like I love all of the Halloween movies, for example. So I'm not too highbrow for anything, but it just loses my interest. So I felt like this movie was vacillating back and forth between like some coming of age stuff that I did find interesting, and then these kind of like fight shooting scenes. And I had a hard time like settling into either one of those, and so I kept, when I say like getting bored. Like I actually had to rewind it a couple times, like go back, and like skip back a couple minutes to see like, wait, how did we get to here?
Sure.
So yeah,
I think that's fair. I think that, especially on my rewatch, grown up eyes for the first time. I don't know how often you've rewatched this since you were a kid, Dan. I'd be curious to know. But for me, anyways, being probably 20 plus years removed since I last saw it, like I was still like I probably had more fun with it than you, Bridget. But I definitely had moments where I'm like, I just had to kind of say to myself, like, wait a second, I don't remember how we got here, but you know what? I don't care because, Louis Gossett Jr. is rolling up his sleeves and he's going to go fucking nail these guys.
I kept having to go like, wait, how did they get out of that little pickle? Like,
right.
like rewind. Like now he has a gun. How did he get a gun?
Yeah.
But I like the first 30 minutes though. I really enjoyed.
Oh, it's great.
The setup is great.
And I didn't really know what the movie was about, so I read like the Wikipedia entry, and I was like, wait, what? Like Colombian drug like so, and like I was like, it's Mark, who's not here, but he kept saying while he was half watching it with me, but he kept saying, but the terrorist is so handsome. He looks like a Jonas brother. Like, what? No, he doesn't.
Andrew Divoff with his acne scars. And
he's very good in it. I mean, he's very.
He is good, and I mean he's a B-movie star. I unfortunately did some Googling, and he is now like a COVID hoax Trumper douchebag.
Can't win them all. Yeah,
but like there's some interesting tidbits about this actor. He's also in he was in a number of Wes Craven movies, like the Wishmaster movies. And he's very much known, or he was when he was acting in the 90s, as like the kind of guy that would not just play a supervillain, but that like he would I mean, maybe it's not so much interesting as abusive, but he would want he would want the actors, in this case, teenage boys, to like literally be scared of him. So he wasn't like so much method, but like
how interesting.
There's a kind of concerning story about Keith Coogan from his interview on the same podcast I mentioned earlier, the After Movie Diner, where he says that basically before the shoot began, they wanted the producers and the director wanted the boys to like all like basically stay in that dormitory for a couple nights to like get to know each other and create a dynamic, etc. And basically Keith Coogan was like, no, I've got a room at the Days Inn. I'd like to go and watch HBO, because he's like a 19-year-old kid or whatever. And so because he declined doing that, when he came to set 2 days later, like basically Andrew Divoff like fake ambushed him and like scared the shit out of him.
Wonderful.
To make him feel like it would feel if you were actually getting held hostage. But
just trying to get him to a better place as an actor,
So also like I didn't feel like any of the acting felt like how people who actually felt like they were being held hostage.
Oh my gosh.
So that was ineffective.
I don't know if I'd be throwing a frisbee every hour on the hour.
The scenes where the headmaster is like giving them a lesson. And I every time the headmaster spoke, I just kept thinking like, that is not a man who understands the seriousness of this situation right now. Like this someone needs to like grab him and shake him and say, no, really.
But also like, why are those kids like sitting there? Like what?
But all of that, like, so it's interesting because going back to the action adventure and like Con Air is and Die Hard, like at no point when you watch those movies, I don't think I would love to know what it's like to see those movies for the first time, right? Because I've like movies you've seen over and over and over. I can't remember what the first experience is, but like at no point when I'm watching Con Air or Die Hard do I feel like, oh, maybe do I know that the outcome is not going to be good for our hero? But at the same time, there are scenes in those movies that are suspenseful to me because I actually worry about like what's going to happen, and I feel like this movie didn't have any of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like there wasn't a lot of where's the drama here?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, he Daniel Petrie Jr., who wrote this and directed it, doesn't he kind of like remove the drama by having the son of the federal judge be escorted out of the school before the terrorists arrive?
Right.
Isn't that like defeating the entire purpose of the script? Like, I'm so confused. Like, why would you do that? Why would you just keep him there?
I mean, it's definitely a contrivance, right? To get to like them being like, oh, these are also children of rich and powerful people.
Yeah, but why? Like,
why
need to do that,
right? Why not just
have the son still there, and then like that's part of the drama. Like, what's gonna happen to the son? What's gonna happen to the father?
There's no real reason to do that other than I guess it's a tad more realistic to say that I guess I don't know how competent the FBI was in that time period, but like
realism here. That's not interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that's not. But to your point, like Con Air is interesting, completely not realistic. So is The Rock, for that matter.
It's like, it's over the top. It's interesting, but like, and this is gonna, I'm gonna sound this is gonna sound absurd, and you're gonna laugh, but the emotions acted in Con Air are real. Like, there's a lot of actors in that movie where like, I believe you right now, and I feel tense when I watch this scene. And like, there were no moments in this movie where I felt tense, even though on paper I should have felt 1,000 times more tense because it's a bunch of children. Right?
Yeah.
So
it's very flat, isn't it? It's super flat.
Yeah.
And I wonder why that is, or why that. I don't know if that's like the acting or like the direction or what we think that is, but it does have. But don't 80s movies tend to be flatter? Don't you think? General, there's like a
little movie called Fatal Attraction. Have you seen that one?
I mean, those like your run of the mill 80s film. When you go back and watch them, the editing is very it's not very concise, right? The scenes tend to run really long, and there's not like a palpable, it's not like you're watching Uncut Gems, it's like very sort of just lazily going through the motions in the script. And I think people back then, there was a different expectations for a narrative, right? You go to see a movie, it's like, oh, it's a movie screen, it's special, it's something interesting, and like that you would get away with, and also everything was on film. So I don't know. Did you guys get that feeling from this? There's just like that very almost TV movie quality to it. Not the look of it per se, but like the acting, the writing, and sort of the editing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, I mean, we have to face facts. You're working with the B-list teenage boys stars of that time period, right? Like, they're still names, at least the top two, like Will Wheaton and Sean Astin.
But this is not your cast of Dead Poet Society.
Exactly, right?
All of young stars. Yeah.
That's a good point.
So, and I think that's a big part of it. I also think, I mean, I was still like I said, I was very much enjoying almost every scene. And I think part of that is because it's all about expectations. And I don't know. I think another reason that I chose this movie is because I've been on a Louis Gossett Jr. kick. I don't know really what set it. Oh, I know what set it off, because I watched. Well, I did watch that, but
of course you did.
I watched a movie on Criterion Channel with him called Skin Game, back from when he was younger in the early 70s. It's like it's a great like forgotten Western, and I just like had forgot. I don't think I haven't seen Roots in several years, and I don't think I ever actually watched the entirety of An Officer and a Gentleman, but he was just like he was magnetic in that movie. So I was like, I gotta watch more Louis Gossett Jr. And so then I watched Iron Eagle, and I watched the entirety of Officer and a Gentleman that time, and I had forgotten that like I used to like show some scenes of his in the original Raisin in the Sun. He's fantastic in that. And so like I don't know. I mean, he's not in all of the movie, but I think that like that's one of the things that really helps it stay together, is that you've got him as, I mean, I think Sean Astin's not great. But I do think like the relationship between the dean and maybe this is also me coming as a high school teacher, kind of putting myself in there a bit. But I their relationship is really is actually, I think, kind of touching.
Oh, I totally agree. That's
Okay.
like the spine of the movie.
Yeah.
Is that narrative.
but like we needed more of that. Like let him left in there without the headmaster. Like I just feel like yes, I agree. That relationship, but I feel like that relationship got like cut out of a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
And then put back in at the end in a way that almost felt like, I don't know,
I feel
unintentional. Like
yeah. In like a typical movie about a boarding school, you would just have the plot of the young rebellious kid and the fatherly schoolmaster, and you just remove all the terrorist stuff. It just becomes like a decent drama or something, right? Like it wasn't even
School Days or School Ties.
Yeah, school. Yeah, exactly.
But the terrorist, like it's an interesting. Like the more I think about the premise, it's interesting, right? Because it's like, I mean, it sounds silly, but it also could be really interesting, not as an action movie, but as a character development piece. And I feel like they didn't do that.
Right. Yeah. I think. Yeah. I mean, so another interesting thing that is going on right now that we try to touch on every time we do one of these anniversary episodes is, what kind of legacy has it left? We're not doing the typical conception, production, release thing. I hope that doesn't make you too anxious, Dan. But
we're going off script. We're doing it
totally
live.
Off script for the finale. But I guess Sony has been trying now for a number of years to reboot Toy Soldiers, either as a new film or as a TV series, at a girls' boarding school with Queen Latifah as the headmaster.
The question is, who would be the terrorists now?
Exactly. I don't know how they would figure. It would have to be
Taliban, or is that out now?
No. Oh gosh.
Can we not do that
I think anymore? Colombian drug lords. Yeah.
No, I think FARC. No, the FARC did a peace deal now, so they're like part of the government, aren't they? Or they're like kind of more legit.
Right. I mean, that's another thing. I knew nothing about Colombia, and so I went on a Wikipedia rabbit hole.
Well, I love the fact that in the novel it takes place in Europe. And it's like a boarding school for American, and it's Palestinians. And the director's like, yeah, we couldn't use Palestinians because they're using too much in movies as terrorists. It's like, oh my god,
yeah,
this is so bad.
But at least he had the forethought to do that. I don't know. I think it definitely. I mean, it was messy, right? Like, who is that American mercenary guy that was with them? The guy with the glasses.
See, I didn't pick up that he was American until I read like the plot summary. I was like, what? He's American? Yeah. Like, I'm so confused. I thought he was just another Colombian dude.
Right. So I think you're right, Bridget, that like if they would have just like not worried about all that, like maybe you still have the big bad, especially because Devoff did a good job being menacing and all that, and to be a solid antagonist. But there is a lot of stuff that you could have cut and then just like reworked with Gossett Jr. and like you were saying, Dan, like not have or like make one of the characters the actual son of the federal judge, and then you would have also freed up a lot of space to really focus on that headmaster and or not headmaster, the dean and the protagonist's relationship. And also like I really liked the dynamic between the central group of five. It was disappointing, of course, but it's 91 that like the Mexican American and the black kid are like the two least developed of the five. But and also like I liked the dynamic with like the younger kid whose dorm they get thrown into, Yogurt. Who unfortunately that actor I learned passed away in the late 90s from a DUI accident, but that like he actually formed. I mean, I think that thing where they had them stay in the dorms together before they started principal photography worked. They did like become fast friends, as teenage boys pretty easily do when you put them in a room together. They actually renamed the character Yogurt because the kid was like trying to eat a yogurt while they were in the van, from the hotel to the set, and it exploded all over him. And so then they changed the script to reflect that like little piece of their relationship, which is kind of cool. I think that even though it's definitely a mess, especially watching it with fresh eyes years later, there's definitely the relationship pieces that work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's like the director basically said. What did he say? Like he said the group of kids really gelled as a group and supported each other. The adults surrounding them were very nurturing of their younger peers. Lou was always very generous. And then he says, it's kind of interesting too here. He talks about how back then, like Beverly Hills 90210, didn't that come out later? Am I like, when did Beverly 90210?
You're the expert.
It was, I think, like 92.
Because he says this here, and he's
maybe
like
91.
He says at the time, I think the original Beverly Hills 90210 was on the air, and it was emblematic of the fashion of casting high school characters from a pool of actors in their mid to late 20s.
The pilot was October 4, 1990. So
yeah. Okay, so that's
yeah.
So he didn't want to do that, so he actually cast people who were 17, 18 years old, and I think it does work. I mean, that part of it, I will say the camaraderie between them feels pretty authentic, like especially to that time, like.
But also, like, the like, so there's also, like, this thing about teenagers, right? Where, like, do they really understand the seriousness when they live through that kind of trauma?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And like, you could almost, like, see that play out in a way that, like, also just, like, was not interesting in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of like, yeah. I mean, do you think that, like, what's interesting is, like, how they come to, I guess, overtake the terrorists and that whole scheme and like all that sort of stuff. There's like that moment where the script, he's the Sean Astin, the lead, Billy, right? He's this kind of prankster type, and that ends up being how they essentially overtake the terrorists. Does that work?
Right.
Does that line, does that logic work here or no?
The logic works in world, and one of the things that was like giving me like a bad taste as I watched this and made me try to figure out like why is it like not just kind of boring but also like making me angry, and it's like, well, the obvious answer is like, oh, there's no women at all in this movie, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you could like kind of reason that
there is an angry mom at the press conference.
Yeah, I was going to say that. That's the one moment I remembered was the angry mom.
30 some odd minutes in, there's a reporter's voice that you hear. and then there's the sex worker, the phone sex operator at the beginning. Yeah. So I think, and I hate to be one of those academic killjoys that reads into movies that people just enjoy from their childhood, but here we go.
That's why we invited you on the cast.
Oh, thank you. So like, you could frame this movie as like a coming of age story. You could frame it as an action movie, but you could also frame it, I think, as this kind of toxic male wish fulfillment coming of age, whereby like the main character, he was the main character, the
Billy,
Sean Astin.
Yeah.
Like, what does he learn though? Does that make sense? So the movie starts with him. No, like it starts with the scene where there's this like kind of stereotypical, and it's like, and it's framed, I think, to be as funny, right? This like male bonding, like he's a bad kid. He's gotten thrown out of school as he's a prankster, like you said, but he's not really a bad guy, right? He's not really doing anything serious. He's not like hurting anyone. But also there are like all these young men listening in on this phone sex conversation, and like they're like kind of making fun with it, and I like that as like this is the first, like, the framework for these young men and their relationships and what they're going through in this movie. And like at no point was there any kind of like correction from the teacher about the specific ways in which also like you're setting up a relationship with women. Does that make sense? So it's not just the absence of women, but like when women are in the film, it's like this problematic thing framed as like a boys will be boys, because he eventually becomes the hero without really having to learn anything except that like he's like forged these friendships and these relationships, and those are important things for young people, right? But also like there's no kind of like lesson learning that I saw.
Well, it's like the lesson that he learns, I feel like, is that like breaking the rules is the right thing to do.
Right.
Is that really what it comes across? Which is a very male.
Yeah.
If you think it's a very male ideology.
Right.
where
And
it's like, oh yeah, rules are for other people.
Absolutely.
Like I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
I can kind of skirt by them because I'm a dude and get away
Don't
with it.
skirt by them, but like it's that quality in me that's going to let me like be the hero.
Exactly.
Here.
Yeah.
And like it almost like that wish fulfillment, almost like. So part of when I was watching it too, it felt like the tone was kind of weird and mismatched, but because it's like you said, Chris, like it's incredibly violent.
Yeah.
But it also almost seems like that piece is for a younger audience, almost the way Home Alone is written.
Yeah, I was totally thinking
like, where it's like, obviously this is absurd, right? But
Right.
I also feel like, and I don't want to just make like everything about toxic culture, because I have a 7-year-old son, and a lot of his imaginative play is like kids being the heroes and like little boys like kind of like defeating bad guys in a way that's like, I think, developmentally appropriate and good, and there's like a need fulfilled there, right? Like, as I mean, I'm not a developmental psychologist, but I think that that's like a thing that like boys and girls do, and like a lot of kids do during play. But then at some point that like it shifts, and so now these are high schoolers, right? They're not little children. And this is not play. This is like an actual scary hostage situation. Like several people die in this movie, right? Like their classmates and one of their teachers.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I will say that it was a lower body count than I expected.
Sure.
It's three,
Sure.
but yeah,
But like,
it's still
nothing.
it's still incredibly traumatic to be playing frisbee so much.
And then you have, I mean, you have the moment of like when one of the students gets killed. And like, why does he get killed? Exactly.
Okay.
Like,
So I wanted to speak to that
this?
real quick. Going along lines of, how masculinity is portrayed in the film. Because it was like, that was a very not like 90s masculine moment, just like the, heroes, like one of the heroes sacrificing themselves. But I also, and maybe it's not intentional. Probably it's not intentional.
Everything's intentional, Chris.
Okay. But I will say, like, I had one of my other like visceral flashbacks I had during the movie was like when they pass off the big like portfolio of drawings and blueprints. Like there was a moment where I like remember thinking as a kid, like, oh, so like that's where part of the message came through for me as a young boy was like, like gathering intelligence and organizing and being thorough, like that's what saves the day, not being a badass that grabs a machine gun and runs out into the quad.
Sure.
So I did like that aspect of it, but I do think it also gets very easily swept away by all the things you just mentioned, Bridget, including another thing that was really telling, I think, early on in the film when the terrorists like line all the kids up and they're like trying to figure out who is related to who. And I thought for sure that would at least be like one token, like, oh, and your mother is the CEO of blah. But no,
this is
I
the
know.
It was just like straight up like, who is your father?
And it's like it's 1991, so like second wave feminism is strong in like, the white upper classes. Like you're absolutely right, Chris. There should have been like a handful of powerful women, right?
Yeah. Shoulder pads.
Something. I mean, the mom did have, I don't know if she's wearing a sweater, I can't remember, maybe a blazer, but yeah, no, I can't get past that, like, so thinking about, like, if they were to reboot this, but make it an all-girl school, like, how would that be perceived differently by audiences? And like, how many male characters would they still be able to write into it?
It would get the Ghostbusters treatment from incels and stuff like that.
Well, do you guys remember there was a news story, entertainment news story, a few years ago where like some production company said they were going to make a gender reversal of Lord of the Rings. And like everybody mocked them mercilessly on the internet, saying basically like if you had a bunch of girls trapped on an island, they would just help each other. Right. There wouldn't be that conflict. I don't know. Is that a similar parallel to like if they do go through with this female focused toy soldiers?
No, I mean, I don't think a bunch of teenage girls would in any way be like wanting for conflict. Like even when you said earlier in this podcast, like put a bunch of teenage boys in a room together and they're fast friends. Like that is not my memory of middle school and high school. Like, my goodness. Like, and I don't mean to like gender essentialized, although that's already the path we're going down. But like, I don't think there'd be lack of conflict. I think it could be really interesting. I just worry that like it would be get the treatment of like the Ghostbuster treatment, like you said, but so people would be upset, but also it would become like a specialist subgenre for like women. And I also don't know like if they aim like action adventure at like women audiences. So the trick is always like if we have something and we're casting mostly women and girls, like how do we make this appeal to a broad audience? And I hate asking that question, and I hope it's clear that this is not my question. This is like the marketing in our toxic culture question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could actually be pretty cool, but I don't know. I also think that they would be able to have like some lead males in that movie, and I think this movie could have had some lead females one way or another. Like no one in the FBI is a woman. I don't know.
I mean,
Like,
unrealistic even back then.
Like you can be a woman and work at an all boys school, right? Like the staff.
I hope so. I mean, there couldn't be like a kid who had a strong relationship with his mother and like maybe
Right.
like with negotiations or something, like
Yeah.
all kinds of ways, right? But it probably wasn't even on the radar, and probably it's the kind of thing where if you bring it up, I feel like it gets shut down so fast. And it's like, it's an all boys prep school. What do you want? Like, end of question, right? Like,
Yeah.
Or end of discussion. But also again, it's not just the all men, but it's the way like that masculinity, like a toxic brand of masculinity is kind of developed in what is like this weird like coming of age meets action adventure hero story that made me just feel very uncomfortable.
Chris, what do we make of this Sean Astin quote that kind of fits into this?
From the Daily Caller?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I apologize in advance for giving the Daily Caller a click so that I could get this quote. But it was just,
I feel this goes right into what we're talking about.
It was too tempting to turn down.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, Sean Astin told the Daily Caller in 2014, quote, "They can't make that movie today," referring to Toy Soldiers, "because everybody's so politically correct. You know, the NAACP would stop a great movie that would do such a great service to black people. You've got to really examine these things and see what's right and what's wrong. Politically correct is absolutely wrong because it inhibits the freedom of thought. I'm so lucky that they weren't so strong then and that the people that let things happen on the screen weren't so powerful then. I was very lucky." End quote. What?
Who's they in that sentence? Who is he talking about?
Why?
The blood drinking Dems, right?
Oh, the QAnon
sorry.
cult.
Why did the movie do such a great service to black people?
What is that about? What is that about? I don't even know what he's talking about.
I'm so confused about everything.
Like, what movie did he watch or be in?
God.
He's probably lost his mind. I mean, clearly he's lost his mind.
I've been searching him a little bit, and I didn't realize he's a Lord of the Rings. He's one of the hobbits, maybe.
Hey, Samwise, yeah.
Sam Wise.
Yeah.
Sam Wise. I didn't realize that was I don't know it. And he, like, several of the things I browsed said, like, famous Christian actor.
Mm-hmm.
John Austin,
Oh, yeah. So. He's done a lot of stuff. He was in The Strand. You guys check that out?
Yeah. He was in Stranger Things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He did that. Okay, yeah, second season. Here's a question, though, about this movie. I was looking at this because I'm always fascinated by how these movies were reviewed back in the time they came out.
Mm-hmm.
Cinema score of an A-.
That's good.
Pretty darn good. So that's a survey of people like 7 o'clock showing on Fridays and like back then probably like 10, 12 major cities in the US. So that's pretty high. So the people who went on to go see it liked it.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine how much testosterone was in that theater?
Okay, whoa. I think we're missing something.
Wait, he's a Democrat, though. Sorry, he backed Hillary Clinton.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And John Kerry participated in campaign rallies.
But now he's a Trumper, probably.
It doesn't.
In 2014. Well, I feel like there's a big there is
nominee Joe Biden. So
there is a significant segment of Gen X, right, that are like very much like committed Dems, but they are super against political correctness. Whatever.
I mean, let's like you can revise that a little to say there's a significant portion of white men.
Yeah.
Consider themselves liberal or progressive and are still very committed to things that like serve the patriarchy and white supremacy. Like that's not how they see it, right? But I mean, just like there are a significant number of white women who would consider themselves like Hillary Clinton supporters and are in many ways implicated in oppression of people of color. So anyway, Sorry,
Here's
that's not
one
fun.
thing about this movie that we're missing. One thing about this movie we're missing. My sister did not watch this movie because of the violence or action.
Right.
She
It's
watched
the
it because of
boys.
the heartthrobs.
Crop
That's a huge reason why this film has such a nostalgic
Sure.
value to it.
Uh-huh.
And if the Google rating here is 87. That's incredibly high. That's just random people going on the movie and clicking. I don't even think that there's certainly, dudes who look back on this movie and be like, oh yeah, cool, it's fun. I honestly think it might be more of the Gen X ladies that like this movie.
You think
because
so?
of that sort
the
of
Wesley Crusher
Tiger Beat-esque
I
crushes.
think you're overestimating the number of women who had crushes on Wesley Crusher because they watched so much Star Trek.
Will Wheaton quit Twitter because he kept getting so much sexual harassment.
Huh.
But
Really?
I think that was probably from men too. But
Yes.
that was also one of the reasons he quit acting, was because he hated how over sexualized he was.
And they certainly do sexualize the young men in this. I mean, they're half naked.
The guy just randomly doing push or sit-ups.
Yeah. I was rewatching the ending this afternoon, and I thought my kids were pretty occupied, and Malcolm had just gotten home from a camp and came downstairs to give me a hug and chat at me, and I paused it, and he was like, "What are you watching? Why are they in their underwear?" And it made me realize how many different scenes, and he's like, "What's happening? Is this a grown-up movie or a kid's movie?" And I was like, "I don't know, buddy.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what it is. It's
not
inappropriate for both.
Watch it, but yeah, I mean,
amazing.
Yeah, so a lot of confused questions. And I was like, "It's a grown-up movie. It's rated R." And he's like, "Why are there little boys in it?" And I was like, "Which little boys?" And it was a scene where there were the younger kid. They were in a dorm room, and the younger kid was sitting down.
Yogurt and his roommate. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I was like, I need you to go back upstairs.
Well, we're talking about how much nostalgia people have for this, or that it. And we're talking as if this movie was a hit, but it wasn't a hit, right?
No, it was not a hit. I don't think so. I mean, it did what? It's another thing too about this movie that's kind of interesting that the director brings up. This is an independent film, technically.
Oh yeah, true.
This is not from a major studio. I think it was Island Pictures or something like that put it together, or Island World. I mean, financed the film, and then TriStar distributed it. But it was pretty much independent, and that's one of the reasons the director took the movie. He was really involved with the Disney world. Didn't want to do a movie for Disney, and sort of found these guys and the financial backing to do it. And so he sort of dove in because of that freedom. I don't think I see any of that on screen, though, if I'm being honest. It does kind of feel like a Warner Brothers type movie. You know what I mean?
Well, it's very much like B-movie quality too, right?
It is, yeah. It
very much inspired by Chuck Norris movies of the 80s and stuff.
Delta Force, that's the one.
Yeah, Missing in Action, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Why do we think it does have an appeal, though? Because it does. I mean, we can't argue that. It has this nostalgic appeal. For me, it's a very specific thing because it relates directly back to watching movies as in my childhood, and sort of experiencing these for the first time. I don't think I ever saw someone get shot like that before on a movie.
yeah.
Or I didn't know what Colombian terrorists were.
Right. Well, I think that's like you were saying, where does that show up on screen, that freedom? I think that's it. It's very simple, and it's not it's not, there's not nowhere else you really see it on the screen, but that's where you see, that's also my very visceral memory of seeing this and being like, wow, this is overly violent, but there's young boys that I can empathize with as the main characters. Same thing with your son walking in on you watching it, Bridget, where it's it probably immediately just struck a match, and he's wait a second, machine guns plus me,
right? I mean, he's walked in on me watching I don't know how to adult movies, not porn, but grown up TV shows or movies, and usually he's not interested at all, right? So this one, he definitely was mid talking to me and was like, "What?
Oh, see,
yeah,
it got him booked."
Yeah.
All right.
I have a question for you guys, because we made these 1991 lists.
Yes,
of our favorite movies. I kind of, the one thing that popped into my head with when going to look at the movies from 1991, and this is sound crazy, and it is crazy. Did 1991 suck for movies?
Yeah, it seems like it.
I mean, what was going? These movies are not great. Like even the movies that I find in my top 10, I was like, Terminator 2, sure, like absolute classic. Boys in the Hood, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's like a solid 5.
Yeah,
right?
like some of the weird ones, like People on the Stairs. Yeah, I love it. Commitment's fine. Thelma and Louise. After that, like movies, I think the movie business is in a really weird place at this time period.
Yeah,
where like they were serving up a lot of gruel and slop because like I guess what postmodernism hadn't happened yet. And so like they're trying to, it was that weird transition between the 80s and 90s where Pulp Fiction didn't exist. It was like between Die Hard and Pulp Fiction, it was just like this gully. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, yes, but it's also weird to say postmodernism didn't exist yet, because I think about like when did the French New Wave happen in like the 60s?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but I mean like in American filmmaking though.
Like transition. Ooh.
Yeah, but I'd be like, what movies do you think in our top 10s would be like postmodern?
No, none. That's true.
My
but I don't
Private
know if
Idaho,
it's
probably.
because it hasn't happened yet. I think it's like a particular era where there's actually some like going backwards in terms of like reaffirming like quote unquote traditional values and things that seem to be like, I think like the early 90s and late 80s were actually this time of a lot of like fear in like shifts of power happening. And like as a result, you get some of these films that like play into conservative little like fantasies or values. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that in kind of piggybacking off that, you have a real distinct not only gulf between quality in the top movies versus the rest of 1991, but also this really, I mean, this was a very strange year also for the Oscars, right? Because Silence of the Lambs, like basically a genre movie, gets all the top awards.
But called a thriller. It was called a thriller, not a horror movie.
Right. Not like a crime movie. Like it's not a mystery. So like it was a turning point, I think, for a lot of not just the general public, but also I think like film criticism, where they started like engaging more seriously. Actually, you mentioned the like what's really postmodern, like Final Nightmare is like inching towards it with New Nightmare, which comes out the next year.
Super postmodern.
And that's probably like one of the first hugely postmodern movies in America anyways. But yeah, I mean, also like, I mean, you and I both have What About Bob in our top 10, Bridget, like that was just like a straight comedy, but it's still like
very strange.
It still bangs because it's weird.
It's super weird.
So yeah, it's very, and also like Beauty and the Beast, it was like the first animated movie to be nominated for Best Picture. So like, yeah, it's growing pains for sure. But I think even though there's a lot of bad movies that year, like those top movies are really like T2 Judgment Day. Like I'll never
just rewatched that.
Yeah,
it's amazing. It's like a masterpiece.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
What?
I know. Okay. I wasn't allowed to.
I mean, if you like Con Air,
All right, I am sending the.
It's like Con Air on like speed, like the movie Speed.
I'm sure I would like it. There are a lot of movies that I wasn't allowed to see as a child, and I like never saw them because I put them in my category of like, oh, this movie is way too intense, and usually they're not. It just was when I was like 8 or 9 or 10 or 11, right? But my dad let me see so much that the few movies that he'd like obviously lost the argument with my mom that I wasn't allowed to see, in my imagination, like, oh, that must be really bad.
For sure.
All right.
Final thoughts. What do we think? Let's start with our guest, Bridget. Will you ever, in your foreseeable future, have an inclination to revisit Toy Soldiers? / do you think it deserves revisiting by anybody else curious about the early movies of the early 90s?
I think it definitely deserves revisiting by anyone who has a nostalgic connection to this. If for no other reason than I think I always find it enjoyable and at least interesting to revisit those movies. And like I have movies from that era that like I've rewatched as an adult and I'm like, oh, this is bad, but I'm still enjoying it, right? So it's hard for me to say because I have no nostalgic connection really, other than the general cast and aesthetic of 1991, right? Which I still was there for that. But I don't think I'll ever watch it again. And I've actually been playing over in my mind whether I would, because I have a lot of movies that like I look forward to showing my kids, some of which I've already done. Home Alone is actually one of them. The first time they were old enough to watch Home Alone, it was a big moment for me. And like this is not even one that I think I would feel excited to like show Malcolm and Coco, to be honest. And I really, again, like I hate being such a killjoy about it, and I don't think I think it's possible to watch a movie like this critically and also still find enjoyment out of it. And again, like I have those movies for myself, so it's not like I'm above that, right? But for me, like I don't think this is even a movie that like I anticipate having like a 12-year-old Malcolm and being like, let's watch Toy Soldiers together and talk about it.
Definitely not. I don't have a 12-year-old and I probably wouldn't do that either.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing it with my kids either, to be honest. Like you said, it was like I almost like thought when they started doing the pranks at the beginning of the movie, like, wait a second, is this more Home Alone than I remember? but then they start getting machine gunned to shreds, and I'm like, okay, no,
it's more Commando.
I think too, like so final thoughts, like there are moments in this movie where it, like I feel like it could have been something really interesting. It could have actually been a movie like about trauma response. Right. I always like those kinds of movies, I know, because I'm a lot of fun. But or like it could be a movie that is like an interesting coming of age, and like they really could have emphasized more like it's the working together and it's the building relationships. It's the realizing we're not alone. That's what helps us like get through this, right? But like the thing that like killed all those like, well, maybe this is going to be something else for me is the scene towards the end when it's the teacher whose name I can't remember, who he has a good relationship with. And they are like splattered in blood. And like they have just like one, and he's like, am I still on pots and pan duty? And he says something like, you think you're gonna get out of it that easy? And they both
I was half expecting a freeze frame.
Absolutely, like this absolutely not. Like this is what a weird tone. So yeah,
it's fine. I'm sure they had copious mental health counselors available.
Yeah, right. I'm sure that as reading from Sean Astin's quote seems like he's really dealt with any of the problematic moments.
No, I don't think he has.
No, I think it could be really interesting. There are parts that are pretty good, but like overall the tone was too incoherent, and it ended up with something I think like more problematic than interesting.
I think that's fair.
I think that's very fair. I mean, I think for me, it's like there's certainly the nostalgic trip to it, without a doubt. And that's a huge draw to rewatching it. Now that I have rewatched it, am I ever going to watch it again? Maybe when I'm like 60. Like I'll go back and watch this. But the thing about the sort of and kind of summarizing it and my feelings about it, like, is this a movie you should seek out and watch? Definitely not. But like, here's what I would say: it's not a movie. It's never going to be on like AMC Classic. Remember when AMC used to play like classic movies all the time?
Yeah.
It would never be one of these movies, right? It would be on some like free channel on Pluto TV, like the action channel. And they would put this on here because it was super cheap to get. I would say that, but I think it is one of those films that, like, if you were like a film scholar or something, it would absolutely be worth going into, because there is a lot to pull out. There's so many things wrong with it that doesn't make it a great film. That it's kind of fascinating in that way when you dissect it. It's like, what the hell's going on here? Like, this is just like a normal all-American film from 1991 that did okay, that people from that era love for some reason, but why?
Yeah,
it's one of those why questions. It's like, what's going on? I
almost am hopeful that what Sean Astin says, political correctness that ruined everything, that like, if like Zennials, is that if a group of like high school kids in my neighborhood watched this now, I feel like they would be like, what the fuck is going on? Like, yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so I'm going to, of course, be completely on the other side of this and say everyone should watch this movie. But I will say, like, I'm okay if you turn it off after my favorite scene, which is pretty early on in the film, and I found out in my research was one of the only improvised moments in the film. And that scene would be the one where after Sean Astin and his friends have pulled the ultimate prank, which I don't understand, but they've brought all the headmaster's office
I did enjoy that.
furniture
Genius.
out onto the quad. Here's the improvised moment. Sean Astin saw a crew member eating a banana and said, "Somebody give me a banana." And so he is very like laboriously eating this banana while Louis Gossett Jr. chews him out. And then he improvised not only eating the banana, but also tossing it into the trash can in front of him. And then Louis Gossett Jr., Academy Award winner, comes back at him with one of my favorite line deliveries. I watched it like 5 times in a row, just cackling it by myself in the basement. "Pick up that banana." And I don't know what's wrong with me. I probably did not get enough sleep, but I adore that scene and that moment. And to find out it was improvised on the spot was really a special kind of, and it goes back to just like it's a dudes rock. Like it's a dudes rock movie, and I'm on board for it.
Yeah, and it's important that we have those movies.
Yeah, I know. Like finally.
Oh
when
man.
are white men gonna just be able to celebrate themselves?
I'm trying
What
to
a
think of a
finale.
movie that does that. Hot Tub Time Machine.
Yeah, this is my hot tub time machine, Dan. I think.
Time Machine. Oh man. Okay, season 4 is over. Season 5. I don't know. Whenever we feel like it.
Yeah, I mean, this is gonna be a shit show. Going back, I'm a high school teacher going back to work in maybe 3 weeks. Maybe it'll be online again. I don't know.
Really?
I don't. Who knows?
No one knows.
Who knows, man?
We don't get paid to do this, so we're gonna come back whenever we want to and feel like it.
Yeah.
It's been a blast, Bridget. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I hope you'll ask me back again. We'll have you on Screen Time sometime very soon.
Please do. Please do.
All right.
All right, that's all she wrote. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.